Yo! Welcome into the show, BroMob. We're your hosts, Chad and Bryan. Today is Monday, August 19th, and man, we have got some awesome stuff for you today. Interviewing the one and only Dr. Jesse Morse from the Fantasy Doctors himself. It's a super awesome interview. Unfortunately, Bryan didn't get to make it because he's the worst, but it's okay. Jesse, I think, enjoyed it more without him being there, so it was good. It was a good time.
Well, Jesse and I, we were chatting offline, and we decided to let you feel good about yourself. That was really the whole point of this.
Well, it did a good job because I feel pretty good.
Well,
I'm looking
there you
good.
Go.
I'm feeling good.
You're smelling terrible.
I'm not smelling so great. It's a bad time.
I could tell.
We got ourselves a jam-packed show, so we're just going to get right into it, Bryan. Preseason is awesome. This is one of the better years preseason I've watched in a long time, which is good for the NFL because it was getting boring. But there's been some really good play. Whoa.
Do you think it has to do with the fact that we're doing our show and we're just so much more involved? Or is it because it's actually that much more impressive?
Yes. And no.
Oh.
So 100% yes
whammy
to the fact that we're doing the show. Also 100% yes to it actually being more entertaining as well. I don't know. It feels more fun. All these college students out there, or just outside of college now, kind of trying to prove themselves. And then you got some feel-good stories like the Browns have the player that was homeless, came in, scored a touchdown his first game, team went nuts. I don't know, it's just fun.
Yeah, it's been fun to see some of the, with the holdouts and some of the injuries and stuff. It's been fun to see some players that we probably wouldn't have been talking about actually talk about. Like, I don't know if you caught the Cowboys game last night, or Saturday night, but man, Tony Pollard shined in that first drive. Cowboys had a struggle to start. Dak got blown up on a blitz, but then they came back. They ran it all the way down the field. 15-yard touchdown, I believe, or 14-yard touchdown to finish off the drive from Pollard, and he looked sharp. He looked good.
He did, and the offense looked good. So I mean, it was just kind of exciting to see all of that. It'll be even better when we get Zeke back, and Cooper's feeling better. Maybe. We'll see.
More to come on that.
Yeah. Foreshadowing.
Foreshadow.
But no, preseason's great. Next week should be fun. You get a lot of the starters out there for most of the first half, getting a lot of the playtime in. So it'd be interesting to see.
Next week is a big week.
It is a big week.
Yeah, I mean,
why?
For a lot of reasons. Well, we've got our League of Record draft on Sunday next week.
Oh, God, I am ready to dominate.
Ready.
All of you listening, you know who you are.
Including the league, including our league.
Yes.
Don't delete this episode immediately.
Don't listen to any of the advice coming your way.
That's the disadvantage, right?
It really is.
We put ourselves out on this show and online now so much that it's so easy for anyone in our league to just see what we're thinking, and we don't hold anything back. Whoever I like, my guys, all that stuff, the guys I really want to target, we're putting them out there, because we want to see our listeners, the BroMob, succeed. So, but yeah, I'm excited about next week. Can't wait.
All right, Bryan. Well, we got a lot to talk about today. Let's move on. BroMob, be sure to follow along after the show by following us on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, anything you could possibly find us at, but Twitter and Instagram at FF Bros Podcast. Be sure to search that hashtag BroMob to get any of our historical news, references, shenanigans, whatever it is. We got a lot out there. So let's get into the show.
News.
Improvements. Jesus.
Hey, I wanted to mix it up.
Of course. NFL's mixing it up a bit here. especially for the Patriots, Josh Gordon has been reinstated to join the team and play. So big news there. Big help for Tom Brady to a team that was already a Super Bowl favorite coming into the season. It should help him out dramatically. It does hurt some other players, though. Julian Edelman's going to see less targets. Was going to be getting a dramatic increase in targets, just being him, no Gronk. But Gordon should be seeing a lot of red zone and end zone looks. So yeah, it's pretty big.
I actually think that Edelman stays about the same. I don't think it's going to improve or impact him very much. I think there'll be a slight impact. I really think the loss of Gronk creates that significant void where it really evens them out and they do about the same. So I think Gordon.
I think what happens here is that Edelman sees less touchdowns. That's kind of what I projected out. I do not think he sees less targets. I think he gets the same amount of catches, same yardage. It's just those looks are going to be less so in the end zone or the red zone. And some of those are going to go more Gordon's way.
Well, think of it this way, though. So I don't know if I agree with that. And maybe you and I are on different pages here, and that's okay. But Josh Gordon only had 3 touchdowns on the season last year. And that was and he played 11 games. So through 11 games, only 3 touchdowns. He was pacing about 5 for the season. If you just kind of run his numbers and they stat out, you'll have about 5 touchdowns. So I really think he'll kind of be that same guy. You've got Edelman there. You've got a young team. And the Patriots are really good about innovating themselves year to year. You're never going to get the same Patriots season one year after another, I feel.
True.
So, I think Josh Gordon kind of is the same guy. I don't see that's why when news dropped, we hit Twitter and Facebook right away and said, hey, don't overreact to this. You don't want to be drafting him in like the 2nd or 3rd round. Like he's not. We don't see him as that guy. If you stat him out last year, he was on pace to have for half-point PPR. He was on pace for 171.9 fantasy points, which would have put him at the wide receiver 22 on the season. So he finished at wide receiver 45. And I think, Chad, we've got him slightly higher than that. I think right now in KT3 he is wide receiver 20, I believe.
20,
right?
Yes,
right on the 20. And that's I feel good about him there. I think that's his high side. He could do worse than that. Yeah. Ooh.
his high side. Didn't even recognize it. Right past the head.
Yep. Zing, right past me. So, yeah, I like Josh Gordon. If you can get him at a value, great. I think there's going to be a lot of guys reaching on him this year. And so you don't want to reach on him. Just remember he's right around that wide receiver 20, tier 6 kind of wide receivers where we have him right now.
Yeah, you should feel safe taking him around players like Chris Godwin, Kenny Golladay, those type of players. Don't jump ahead of that and take him with players like Keenan Allen and Antonio Brown. Don't do that. Don't even. Don't get me upset. Do we need to bring that segment up and just only talk about that? I'm going to get upset.
Maybe next week.
I'm not going to do it. I'll move on.
All right.
Case Keenum, the quarterback for the Washington Redskins, is on pace to be the Week 1 starter for the team. Kind of nothing new here, but it was it's just indicative of what we've been seeing with Dwayne Haskins. He looks like a rookie. He's making mistakes. He does have some good throws in him. He had a nice deep ball in Week 2 here in the preseason. It connected for a long touchdown, but at other times he's forcing balls when he shouldn't be. He's making poor decisions. So he's just not starter worthy yet. So Case Keenum on pace.
So how do you feel about this? I don't want to spend too much time talking about Case Keenum, for God's sakes. But my question here is, if you're the Redskins, I don't know, this is my belief, you're not going anywhere this year. Let's just be honest. Right. So why not just throw Haskins in there, let the kid learn? You're not going to learn sitting. Yeah, you're going to learn sitting on the bench if you're behind a guy like Aaron Rodgers or Andrew Luck. You've got some knowledge. You're learning from Case Keenum. So why not just throw him in there, let him get the reps? I don't I don't get the whole Case Keenum thing, and I think it's very temporary. I think Haskins starts by middle part of the season.
Maybe, but if it was any other team, I would agree with you. But it's the Redskins, who have possibly the worst training staff in existence. So you risk injuring your franchise QB, putting him in there right away, one. And two, you risk that confidence factor. So that QB comes in there, ruins them possibly for the future, right? So you heard all of that.
Well, let's be honest. Haskins could, with the Redskins training staff, Haskins could probably walk over to the cooler to get a bottle of water and roll his ankle and be out for the season.
That's very true. The water might be laced with sand. And so he's just
eating away at those
sand.
joints. Just grinding away. Yep.
Yeah. Dallas Cowboys running back Ezekiel Elliott has been seen flying back to Dallas from Mexico, which the photo's hilarious. Zeke looks like he might even be sleeping in the photo. I don't know why it was taken or why it was shown, but clearly coming back for a reason. Contract talks might be coming to an end here, so which is good news.
Maybe, or maybe he's just coming home for a little bit.
No,
I mean that could be very well. I mean, just saying,
So he's been training.
Yeah, but he's been
built
down
like
there.
a nice little training regimen.
Yes, but he's been in Cabo down there training for weeks now. At some point, you ever been on vacation? You're just like, God, I just want to go back home and sleep in my own bed. I just feel like maybe that's what's gonna happen. Maybe he's going home, do some stuff. He ends up going back to Cabo.
Haven't been sleeping in the beds that Zeke has been sleeping in, possibly in Cabo. It might be the nicest bed in the world. I have no idea.
Yes, made of cloud.
Yes, cloud bed.
Cloud bed.
Cloud bed. Patent pending.
Trademark.
Don't take it from us. So the Los Angeles Chargers and running back Melvin Gordon have not made any progress towards a new deal, which makes sense. They don't need to. I mean, they got two capable backs back there in Austin Eckler and Justin Jackson that they don't need to rush Gordon back. So the problem is he just doesn't have any leverage here, and it's looking more and more and more and more that he's not going to play week one and possibly hold out into the season.
Yeah, don't mess up my Eckler pick. All right, deep in
Eckler
drafts, he's a value.
Good.
He's a value right now. So keep on holding out.
It's not going to happen for long. The closer we get, the more Eckler's going up. So
maybe he gets traded?
Of course. You're hoping. Please. If you're drafting him, A, good luck. And B, you need to have insurance policies in place. Draft players that are sure things behind them. Don't go with players like Damian Williams or Leonard Fournette who might get injured. Go with more surefire bets in players like Mark Ingram on the Baltimore Ravens, who's definitely going to get carries with that team. Players like Chris Carson, who's showing more and more and more like he's the running back one with Seattle. So take those players. They're safe. They're going to get you points. Don't take a chance on somebody who might get injured and might not play either. And then you have two running back spots with nothing.
Maybe take this next guy.
The guy after this next guy, actually. So
that's what I meant.
Running back Kenyon Drake, who has been injured and seen in a walking boot recently, has opened up the gates for the Bellagio to take place right in his backyard.
The Bellagio.
The Bellagio to step in. And he's looked like a monster during practice. He's busting large touchdowns. He's showing great vision, which wasn't something that he showed last season. Last year, as a rookie, quite often he would not hit the right holes. He'd get stopped at the line of scrimmage and averaged not very well in the yards per carry category there. So if he's just learned, it sounds like, to, hit the right holes, he can capitalize on that size-speed combination he has to do some really dangerous things. So one of the things that I did not believe in was Kalen Ballage coming into the season, and I eat my words a little bit because he's showing more and more like he's that guy.
Would you say that if Kalen Bellagio, a.k.a. Kalen Ballage, plays his chips right, he could hit a jackpot.
One might even say he's got all of his craps together.
This is terrible.
We're losing all of our listeners as we speak. That's going to be it for our news this week, BroMob. If you want to just keep caught up on all the news, go to our Twitter and go to our website, thefantasyfootballbros.com. Check out KT3, where we got all of the latest injury updates, news, and whatever you need for players. So let's move on to our interview.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention?
Interview time.
All right, BroMob, welcome to this interview. We've got Dr. Jesse Morse with us today to talk to us about some really important things that you need to be focusing on from your day-to-day fantasy world, making sure you're getting the right players. Doctor, thank you for joining us. Thank you for coming in. Really happy to talk to you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dr. Jesse Morse, ladies and gentlemen, is on his own podcast called The Fantasy Doctors. Dr. Morse, can you tell us a little bit about your show? How did you and Dr. Prek and some of the other folks you have there get started? How'd you meet? Everything like that.
Yeah, so all of the Fantasy Doctors was created about 3-4 years ago, maybe a little longer than that. And Prek, Dr. Prek actually, he's a foot and ankle orthopedic surgeon at Duke, and he realized that all of these injuries that happen in all sports, we were really just pretty much at the mercy of beat writers and basically saying this is how long this guy is going to be out, or this is the type of injury that it is, and so on and so forth. So being inquisitive and being smart and saying, all right, well, there's so much money, there's so much resources that go into, fantasy football and fantasy baseball and everything, that why wouldn't we have someone who actually gives accurate timelines, that sees these people every day and was actually medically trained to do so. So that's basically what he established. I've been on board for maybe 3 years or so. And I was finishing up my residency, heading into sports medicine fellowship when I started. I now practice in Florida, just north of West Palm Beach. And I cover a lot of sports, predominantly baseball nowadays, because there's not much football roughly around where I live. But I had some professionals under my care in training, and I still cover the Miami Marlins, who have potential over the next couple of years whenever they need me. But they're more based in Miami, so it's just more sporadic stuff. I see all these injuries that we hear about every day. Like I see fractures. I saw a bunch of stuff yesterday while I was on call. So I just kind of translate it to the specific player, what you're asking. And I'm a crazy fantasy player myself, predominantly baseball and football. So I can translate that to some people who really don't play either, any fantasy. They just know the medicine. So when you put the two together, I kind of like to think I'm a little bit of a total package, because I can correlate, this guy's going to go out, this guy's going to come in. Who do we go get on the waiver wire? Is this guy really going to be 100% in 2 weeks, or knowing what he has to do? Is he really going to be closer to 4 weeks or whatever? So we kind of put that out weekly, daily, constantly. We have a combination of a website, the Fantasy Doctors. Our Twitter is probably our primary handle. We do a little bit of Instagram, and then we started a Patreon page a couple weeks ago, because we realized that there was a lot of content that needed to be put out, but it was just too much to put out for free. So it's not expensive. It's $10 a month. I mean, it's not crazy. But it allows users to say, all right, I want my team analyzed. Is this guy versus that guy? Who should I play? And that type of stuff is very time consuming. So we said, we'll give you the initiative if you want to come join us. And that's basically patreon.com/ the Fantasy Doctors. And they're pretty easy to find, but yeah, that's kind of how it started. And then we have a whole team. Everybody on the team is a physician, either orthopedic or sports medicine trained. We have hand surgeons, we have foot surgeons, we have back, we have everything.
Yeah, that's awesome. And one of the things, so Bryan and I use you guys quite a bit, especially for all the injury news that's coming out, just to understand what's going on. And you guys go into a lot of detail about some of the foot injuries, some of the calf, whatever the injury may be with the players. You guys just go into so much intricate details for that, and I just think it's so helpful. So BroMob, check out their Patreon. It's definitely worth it. Bryan and I kind of get the... Dr. Jesse Morse just basically said that he's got the leg up on everybody. He understands what's going on. And if you can go out to Patreon and see what they're doing, you'll get that leg up on everybody too. So check them out, patreon.com /the Fantasy Doctors. So let's get into this a little bit. Dr. Morse, for the 2019 fantasy season, what type of injuries should our BroMob or any fantasy owners for that matter be most worried about going into the season?
So a lot of the injuries you're going to hear about early onset in the season. You've already heard a lot about them.
Yeah.
Over the first couple weeks of training camp and preseason, and then really the first 4 to 6 weeks of the season is predominantly hamstring injuries.
Mm-hmm.
And you've seen that with Aaron Jones. You've seen that with Damian Williams. I mean, there's probably about 10 guys in Kiki Kute. A lot of people have hamstring injuries.
Yep.
And a lot of that, depending on the severity and depending on when it happens, if these guys are smart, they can get back, in 3-4 weeks or whatever. But if they're silly and they think they can rush the timeline, you have a situation where, like Leonard Fournette last year, where he came back faster than he should have, at least medically speaking should have, and then he proceeds to re-injure it and make it even worse. So now he's out another 4 to 6 weeks, and your top 1, 2, third round pick, whatever you happened to get him last year, was basically like a loss for like almost the first 10 weeks. So it's like, at that point, you're like, either you got lucky because you happen to have somebody else that was equally as good filling in, or you were done and you wasted either money or time and resources on this team because of this guy. So we can kind of tell you how long this guy should be back. If the media is telling you 1 to 2 weeks, is that really 1 to 2 weeks, or is that just what they think, or is that what Google said, or so we can, based on, obviously we didn't evaluate these players, because if we did, we wouldn't be able to tell you about it anyway. But we kind of, based on what we know and whatnot, we kind of give you the idea of, all right, is this really 2 weeks, or is he really going to take closer to 4? So, I mean, is it somebody you can trade and flip, or is it somebody you should sit until he's really ready, or something like that? So we kind of give you that analysis.
Yeah, that's perfect. So you actually brought up a really good injury there. So the hamstring injuries, it's always one of those ones where people they're kind of confused at what those timelines and those time frames are, because everybody's different, right? So Damian Williams, for example, seeing kind of what happened with him, and then they brought him out, and he's already practicing again with the first team offense. He hasn't seen any game time or anything during preseason, but concerning that he's out on the field, doing some running, doing some activities, is this something that we should be worried about with him going into the season?
So he actually ended up playing in the first the first team I think it was last night or the night before.
He did, actually.
So initially, I was concerned that they brought him back so quickly. But in hindsight, it sounds like he was really lucky, and it was like the mildest of mild hamstring injuries, because we have to make the assumption that when he was on the field, he actually pushed it. I didn't get to watch the game, but and if he's able to push it at 95, 100% and did not suffer a setback, then he's pretty much good to go.
Okay.
It's the issue, the guys like I mentioned, Fournette, who they push it harder in practice, but they don't really go all out. And then when they get back in the game, they go all out, suffer a re-injury, and then they're back on the shelf. So I'm not overly worried about Damian Williams anymore. Aaron Jones is not quite out of the woods yet for those two specific kind of semi-major hamstring injuries that we know of. A good rule of thumb is you kind of have 4 categories of hamstring issues. The first one is just a cramping, no real injury to the muscle belly itself. You just kind of irritate it, or you cramp up because you're really dehydrated. And that really, you're normal the next day or the day after. Like, it's not a big deal. Grade 1s are, there's some swelling in the muscle, but there's no real tearing. And then grade 2s are basically, if you think of a piece of rope and you were to rip it in half, and still have half of the muscle there, or half of the rope there. That would be the muscle. So you still have half of the muscle, but obviously you need the whole muscle to really fire on all cylinders. Grade 3 is literally torn in half or torn off the bone. And those are quite rare. They're not very common, thankfully. And when you do get those, you usually have to have surgery because that bone you're not getting it back on the bone without a big screw or whatnot. So most of the time you're going to see grade 1s. Sometimes you end up seeing a grade 2. If you want a rule of thumb, I mean, everybody's a little different, but I'd say grade 1 is anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks. A grade 2 is anywhere from 4 to up to 8, depending on just kind of where the location is, if it's a re-injury, if it's a new injury, is it over a joint, which specific muscle it is, because there's 4 muscles. So it's not straightforward and complicated, and everybody's a range. Some guys happen to heal a little faster, and some guys just don't, and age does play a role in that.
Mm-hmm. So, speaking of players, you brought up Aaron Jones. What are some of the players that fantasy owners should be kind of wary about going into the 2019 season, just based on past injury history, any kind of injuries that's happening during the preseason that we've seen, or practices, anything like that? What are some of the players that we should be wary of? So
I basically do all my rankings indirectly based on injury. So they essentially, there's like 5 guys that I really don't want to touch. So the first one is Devonta Freeman. People really like him this year, but if you just look at 2018, how did he help you? I mean, he was on the field like 30 plays or something. He was a wash. He's not exactly a spring chicken anymore. You're paying for a 2017 season and not a 2019 season. Another guy that I love his talent, but he just hasn't been able to stay healthy the past 12 months is AJ Green. I love when he's on the field. He's a wide receiver 1, and there's really not much of a question there. But the issue is now he's coming off toe surgery, and now he injured his foot, the other foot. So now he's got basically 2 bum feet, so to speak. Yeah. So I mean, it's just like, I don't think he's going to be ready for week 1. It's probably going to be closer to week 4 if he is ready but again, we don't know the severity of it. Yep. It sounds like he had a little avulsion fracture, so that usually means surgery and closer to 6 to 8 weeks, which would put us closer to, week 3 or 4, maybe a little later. And then you got guys like Amari Cooper, who's dealing with a inflammation of the plantar fascia. If you've ever had or heard of plantar fasciitis,
yeah.
You know how awful it is, and it's very challenging to come back from. The biggest name that's probably lingering in most people's minds and mouths right now is Andrew Luck. Mm-hmm. He is dealing with a couple different things. We really don't have a good specific diagnosis, but we've kind of done some deductive reasoning based on several different reports, and we have to take with Irsay and Ballard and whatnot. What they say with a grain of salt, because they kind of screwed us a couple years ago with his shoulder. But so basically, he came in with a calf injury a couple months ago that we found out, basically before training camp. And those take maybe 3 to 5 weeks, depending on the severity and depending on your position. So that really wasn't concerning that far ago. But then we find out that there's a different issue, and they first called it a little piece of bone. And then they said, it's in his foot. And then they said, no, it's actually his high ankle, which doesn't make any sense. And then they're saying, it's a little bit of a bone, a quote unquote bone, which means it's probably what we call calcific tendinitis. So what that is basically a piece of calcium that develops, the body kind of builds inside of a muscle or a tendon or a ligament. For him, it's probably in the Achilles tendon, which is a concerning location, because what it does is it weakens that tendon, and what it has a tendency to do is it's going to be A, painful, and B, it's going to limit his mobility and increase his risk for essentially tearing his Achilles. So they need to really make sure that it gets properly addressed and gets calmed down. He looked okay in the video that I saw yesterday. He was moving pretty well laterally. But at the same time, can he repeat that for 2 or 3 hours without having a lot of pain? Is he able to, get out of the way of would-be sackers? Can he step into his throws? Is he going to take off and run? Is that thing going to cooperate? That's part of the issue. I really need to see him practice for 2, 3, 4 days, maybe get a couple reps in a preseason game, which I don't think will happen, before I feel confident drafting him as my top 3 quarterback.
Yeah. And that's kind of where we have him ranked. So we have him in the top 3, but it's based solely on the fact that, hey, he's healthy to play, and he's not really going to miss any time. However, the more and more we hear about this injury, it's scaring us. It's scaring everybody. And I know Irsay brought up, I think it was Irsay. Irsay brought up the fact that, hey, this isn't the same thing as Kevin Durant. And it was almost like no one had asked him that. He just kind of brought it up. And so it put fear in our eyes that, hey, are they gonna push him out there because he's looking good during practice during these 1-hour stints or 30-minute stints? Is he gonna go out into a real game time action for 2 to 3 hours and he not be able to hold up at that? So it's something that's frightening. What's kind of likely to happen here? What's the likelihood that he misses a game, 2 games? What that kind of looks like?
So tentatively, with our diagnosis that we think, and obviously we're basically only going on reports, we really
Correct.
haven't got a final accurate diagnosis that we can take to the bank. I would be very surprised if he plays in week 1. If my aim is closer to week 4, and at that point, I would say he is at risk for potentially missing up to 6 games in this season. So at that point, you're saying, all right, I need him to be a rock star for basically 10 games.
Yep.
And if we don't have a choice of when those games are and who they're against, obviously. So, is it the first 4 games? Is it intermittent games? Is he reliable when he is on the field? Coming into 2019, he was my number 1 quarterback. I loved his potential. We know what he has to offer. We see how dynamic and dominant he is when he's on the field. He makes very smart decisions. He's got a great arm, status post-shoulder surgery. But now I'm like, this injury cloud, is he even a top 8 quarterback if he misses 6 games? Can you trust him?
True.
And can you waste that much capital or spend that much capital on him? I don't care if you're playing in a free league or a $2,000 buy-in league or whatever. It's I would rather just pivot to somebody who may not have as much potential but may not also have as much risk.
Correct. Yeah, you're essentially drafting a guy, if he's to miss the first 2, the first 4, the first 6, you're drafting a guy to end your season for you, right? You're bringing him in to close it out. So, and it's too high of draft capital to go with somebody like that. Especially right now, he's going in the 6th round. A lot of people are still hoping that he plays, which he might. But the likelihood just keeps going down with him. I agree. I'm leaning towards the boat of staying away from Andrew Luck. There's just too much risk. And anytime you're doing a draft of any type, you want to minimize the amount of risk on your team. So,
yeah, I agree.
Very concerning. Another thing that's kind of concerning for fantasy owners, so Todd Gurley, another just confusing situation where the team's they're just kind of holding back some. And then whenever he's playing, they're talking him up. Sean McVay came out the other day and stated that he's seen him running faster than he's ever ran before in practices. And I think it's building hopes up that, hey, you know what? He might play 60% of the time this season, and I would still want a 60% of the time Todd Gurley on my team. Is that really something with Todd Gurley's knee and the arthritis that's there? What's the likelihood of injury happening, or the team just not playing him as much as what people are hoping?
So this is by no means an easy answer.
Yeah.
When the first information about his quote unquote arthritis came out, it was, I don't know, maybe March. And I'm going to step back and say, and some of your listeners might hate me for saying this, but I'm from Boston and I'm a Patriots fan.
Oh.
So I grew up serving beer at before it was called, before it was the current stadium, but it's basically the same place. So I've been a Patriots fan my whole life. Like, I don't know any different. I'm not a bandwagon jumper or whatever. But either way, I watched the Rams give him like 13 carries in the most important game of the year.
Yeah.
A guy who they just basically signed off the street in C.J. Anderson did much better than him in the entire playoffs. And Gurley was otherworldly in 17 and was pretty damn dominant in most of 18, except for the last couple of weeks. So how do you go from saying, oh, I'm healthy, I'm fine, to not doing anything, skipping several weeks of practice? He basically took a month off. This is he wasn't even 25 yet. He's 25 now or a couple weeks from now. So it's like there's something going on here.
Yeah.
And when he had an ACL tear when he was in college.
Yep.
And for the most part, that isn't overly concerning. But here's what happens. When you tear your ACL, you have a tendency to tear something called the meniscus in about 60% of the time, which is essentially like the buffer in your knee. Think of it as the shocks for your knee. So if you tear that meniscus, you basically are removing part of the shocks in your knee, because that's what they do when they fix it. And that leads to significant arthritis formation much faster than if you didn't tear it. Furthermore, this guy was a track star in college and in high school, so he's got a lot of additional wear and tear.
Yep.
He's put up ridiculous numbers in high school. I mean, just look at his numbers; they're ridiculous. It looks like video game numbers. And then you have to take into consideration that he also was really, really highly paid. So he's not really playing for a contract if you think of it that way. I hate to think of it that way, but it happens. It's true. And then they draft high capital in Henderson. Malcolm Brown doesn't look bad. He's respectable. So it's like the issue I have with arthritis, and it's particularly knee arthritis, which I literally treat every day, is that it's unpredictable. Yeah, you might be able to calm it down, but the people that have it are usually in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. Not a 24-year-old who's trying to run 200, 300, 400 times a year, whether it's a route or trying to run, in between blockers or whatever. So the problem with it is that he may go 10 weeks with a perfectly healthy knee that's cooperating, but he may go 2 weeks and his knee flares up and it takes him 4 weeks to calm it down.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to draft your second pick with that much uncertainty?
It's a lot of risk.
That's the issue I have with him. If it's best ball, then you can get away with it because you don't have to really worry about when you're going to start him.
Yep.
If it's a season-long league, you don't have that luxury. You have to decide. So, I mean, yes, he's still a stud, but this, from what we know, his knee is, there's a good chance it's going to flare up and he's going to potentially miss anywhere from 2 to 6 games this year.
Yeah.
So that's the issue that I have. They're going to decrease his workload. He's probably going to cut some weight because that's a smart thing to do. They're going to be less aggressive with him with pads training and maybe take a week, 1 or 2 practices off a week to give his knee a rest. But he needs this knee to function and to do his job, and I just can't depend on him. So as much as I like him, I just can't. I did like a 15-minute similar video on our Fantasy Doctors YouTube page you can check out. And if you check out a fantasy draft guide, which is where I basically wrote, literally typed out 50 pages in Word, basically 1 or 2 pages depending on the person for each player. Gurley has probably the longest profile because he's such the biggest name and this kind of controversial injury. And I basically talk about all this. So the concerning and warning flags are there. I understand if people want to say, I'm not really concerned. Well, then you're just naive and you just don't want to see the facts. Like, explain to me why else he wouldn't have really showed up in the playoffs, and they happened to get lucky and have a dominant team and still made it. But that doesn't change the fact that he didn't really help them that much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he had, 2 or 3 carries across the entire postseason where he looked good, but then outside of that, the remainder of them were just getting stopped right at the line. So it just wasn't impressive, and it wasn't indicative of a team that's looking to use a player as their star player as they talk like him to be. So, all right, I got 2 more questions for you. I promise I won't hold you up anymore. We've got 2 high profile players that are holding out in Zeke and Melvin Gordon. So how prone to calf strains, hamstring injuries, those soft muscle pulls are players like Zeke and Gordon? Like how prone are they to getting those coming into the season, considering that they haven't been working out in training camps, they haven't been to real football practices, they haven't been playing in preseason and getting real in-game snaps? What's the likelihood that something might happen to either one of them, especially with Gordon, who has a history of injury?
Yes, so that's a fantastic question. So a lot of people kind of take that out of the equation and say, oh, when they come back, they're going to be perfectly healthy and they're not at any increased risk. It doesn't really work that way. I mean, there's a reason why they have preseason. There's a reason why they have OTAs. There's a reason why they have preseason games that's extended for 4 to 6 weeks. These guys need to get their reps in. They need to get their muscles firing. They need to get their mind and body on the same page. I'm not overly concerned about Zeke. He's kind of a genetic freak, kind of like Adrian Peterson, in my opinion. Melvin Gordon obviously hasn't been able to stay as healthy. We know that Gordon was basically developed his own little mini camp in Mexico, go figure. And he sounds like he was really pushing it hard, and he's in great shape. So obviously, and just given his longevity, really, he's never really missed any time that I can come to think of, regarding injury-wise. Melvin Gordon is obviously a little bit more of an increased risk. I'm personally avoiding both of them. And, before last year, I don't think it was a big deal. No one really held out. But ever since Le'Veon Bell held out, like, that seed is planted, and it will never – the people that drafted him last year, first, second, third, whatever pick, and literally lost everything, all of that value, assuming he was coming back, they had that taste in their mouth will never go away. And I would not be surprised if Gordon held out for several games, because unfortunately the nature of NFL is these running backs have limited value because they're such a short time. Devonta Freeman got a monster contract and basically missed almost all of last year. Now we're talking about Le'Veon Bell, who got a big contract, and we'll remain to be seen what happens with him. I'm sure he'll be okay this year. Gurley had a monster contract, and now he's uncertain, and they couldn't even play him in the most important game of the year. So it's like, what major contract for an NFL running back has worked out in the past 5 to 10 years? I can't think of one. Whereas quarterbacks and wide receivers seem to do quite well, for position players. So part of the issue is that the owners and the analytics departments are like, these guys are pretty much almost replaceable, which is sad, but it's true. They may not be 100% correlated, but they make do. So that's part of the issue. It's like, these guys, I understand they're going to want to get paid, but at the same time, it's like, if you want to make these millions of dollars, you have a short window, because this is the position that you happen to be really good at. So, I mean, I would say I'm not overly concerned about Zeke. I would still draft him as a top 5 pick if they said he was coming back. Melvin Gordon, I'm kind of a little bit farther on, and maybe second or third round. He has top 15 upside, but he's almost guaranteed not to play all 16 games. And now he's got Eckler and Justin Jackson probably splitting carries, whereas Pollard looks really good, but my suspicion is he would probably get 5 to 8 carries a game or touches a game if Zeke comes back. So it's like...
Yeah, agreed. I mean, so we're in the same boat with Zeke. We anticipate Zeke to be there week 1. And we do actually anticipate Gordon to miss games, just mainly due to the fact that Gordon has no leverage in his contract situation because they do have Eckler and Jackson there. Whereas Dallas, there's not much leverage there, and it really hurts their chances of being a strong team without Zeke. So Dallas, we anticipate caves before LA does for Gordon, and because of that, Gordon to hold out. And if he holds out into the season, again, because he's injury prone, well, let's not call him injury prone. Let's just say he's been through injuries in his past. We anticipate there to be a little bit of rust to kind of get knocked off. And if it doesn't get knocked off, then we could definitely be seeing Gordon missing more than just the games that he's held out for.
Yeah, I mean, and now you throw in the Amari Cooper injury.
Yes.
And basically, Dallas is potentially losing their 2 offensive players, that non-quarterback players, that are dynamic. I mean, I know I like Gallup this year, but I don't think he's ready to be a number 1. I think Pollard showed fantastic flashes last night, but can he do that versus dominant teams?
Yeah.
Dominant,
teams ones and everything.
Yeah, so it's like, I feel like Zeke has a lot more leverage than Gordon does because their structures and their injury history or whatnot. They announced today that Zeke would not get any fines or any issues with the biggest incident or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So it's like everything's pointing in the right direction, and I think probably Zeke will be back in a week or 2. Gordon, I don't know, could be Lev Bell 2.0. I don't know.
It could be. It's up in the air. So, all right, I got one last question for you, Jesse. Thank you so much for sticking in and keeping this going with me here. So, Adrian Peterson, 34 years old, still holding on to that number 1 running back spot in Washington. What's the likelihood of a running back his age, A, staying healthy throughout a season, and then B, producing a 1,000-yard season? His legs just holding up and allowing for that to happen.
So part of my thoughts with Peterson is that, first of all, he's basically a genetic freak.
Yes.
What do I mean by that? Most people take 9 to 12 months to return from ACL reconstruction, and they're really not right for almost another year after that. So like for this year, it would be like your Julian Edelmans and your Dalvin Cooks, like those people. Well, he came back in basically a little over 6 months and set a record. Like, that's crazy. He's always been a genetic freak. I mean, you could just see it in him. He's just athletically gifted like no one else. So I think a lot of his issues right now stem from his bet, unfortunately. So I feel like he's indirectly driven. If he was financially stable, he probably wouldn't be playing anymore unless it was for like records and stuff. So is he able to do it? Yeah, I got a little pause with the entire Redskins organization, probably because of different things that have happened. Like, what the heck happened with their quarterback's injury? What happened with Darius Geis's knee infection after his knee? Like, why is Trent Williams so adamant that he wants nothing to do with the medical staff? Like, what type of incompetencies are there that lead to these high-profile players who've been around medical staff their whole career, pretty much daily, to say, I don't want anything to do with this medical staff? Like, that is a red flag to me, and I don't have any faith in their offense. Case Keenum is going to be the starting quarterback, likely. Sounds like that's the way it's going. And basically, Geis, I don't have any trust in this year. He's not even 9 months truly out. He's between 9 months and 12 months. But basically, I don't have any faith in him this year. Their other rookie, Bryce Love, tore his ACL in basically January or just before that, so he's not probably going to play much this year. So it's going to be Thompson, who's been banged up. So I think Adrian Peterson is going to get a lot of touches. They don't have much offense. I mean, Jordan Reed is like a corpse. It's like they don't have anybody to throw to catch. Maybe Quinn does a little bit, but it's like I can't rule out Adrian Peterson because he continues to defy the odds. And,
He really
it's
does.
just, one of those things. You have the rule, which is like, people don't come back from Achilles tears as running backs or as older wide receivers, a la Donta Foreman and Emmanuel Sanders. But then you have the exceptions like Adrian Peterson, and you can't rule out Adrian Peterson because he's just genetically gifted.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so right now Peterson's going just so late in drafts, and he could just end up being that steal for your team because we're on the same boat about Darius Geis, and we've actually labeled him as one of our busts for the season, not necessarily a breakout or anything like that, just mainly due to the fact that being on the Redskins, because that training staff, there's definitely something wrong there with the amount of injuries that happen every year with that team. And so Geis is just in that system again. What's the likelihood of something happening again? And we're thinking it's very high. So Peterson's just one of those very late round steals that could get a lot of. He's already going to get work because they're not just going to give it all to Geis right away after his injury. He's going to get worked in still, which is why he's the running back one right now. But he could end up being something good for teams. So Peterson.
Yeah, I definitely think he's a value pick at where he is. I really haven't reached for him, or not reached for him, but really drafted him. I'm predominantly only doing best ball right now. I kind of wait till as late as possible because of all these injuries, and I want to know who's actually going to play and how the depth chart's going to shake out. And is this guy is Carry-On really going to be a 3-down back, or now it looks like a 2-down back when they're pulling him off the field on third downs, and so like that type of stuff. And if you're making informed decisions in late July and there's a whole month's worth of preseason that guys can tear their ACLs and have bad injuries and fractures and all this stuff, like just save yourself the trouble and draft late. Like,
yeah,
do it as late as possible before real games start. Like Labor Day weekend, unfortunately, is perfect. For that matter, like basically, do you save yourself the trouble? Stop trying to read into this and be smart about it. We'll keep you updated on all these injuries. I put out a daily report or semi-daily every other day, if not, about all the injuries that are on the board, what the real timeline is. They are paid for right now only because our subscribers have to have something that is a perk for them. But the list will continue to grow and just kind of grin and bear that injuries are going to happen. They're going to indirectly affect your team. You just have to roll with the punches and make sure you have the appropriate depth and be smart about who you draft. And if I personally have a risk score for each of the major guys that I wrote up out of 10, 1 to 10, 10 being the riskiest possibility and 1 being really don't worry about him at all. So a guy like Laurent Fournette is like a 9 or an 8. Like he's really high. Or somebody like, whoever is like a 3 or a 4. So it's like, I'm not really worried about that guy, but this guy, like he's going to breathe and get an injury. Like a Jordan Reed, like the guy is walking like glass.
He really is.
So it's like, just be smart. I mean, yeah, it might be a good value, but what good value is he if he's on injured reserve or out for 4 or 5 weeks and then you end up dropping him because you don't have the bench space? It's like, just be smart.
Yep, absolutely. All right, well, Dr. Morse, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you here. You got the gracious, just the wonderfulness of not having to talk with Bryan, so be happy with that. Thank you so much for joining in. It's been great. Again, BroMob, if you want to check them out, check out the Fantasy Doctors on YouTube and go check out their Patreon page as well. As Dr. Morse said, it was $10. There's so much information, so many things out there that can help you get that one leg, that one step in front of everybody else on your league. So check them out. Dr. Morse, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. All right, BroMob. Well, that was our interview with Dr. Jesse Morse from the Fantasy Doctors. It was a pleasure to talk to him, and I hope that you guys get some wonderful news and information off of him. Go into your drafts with some more confidence, knowing what players that you should be taking, some players that you shouldn't be touching, and things of that nature. if you want. Check them out at the Fantasy Doctors on YouTube, and check out the Patreon to give them a little bit of help there as well, because they're doing a whole lot of stuff for people out there that we love and you guys should love as well. That's also going to do it for this week's show. Be sure to tune in every Monday to stay up to date on the fantasy football world and to gather any insights on how to dominate your fantasy football league.
Yeah, also, BroMob, be sure to check out keytothetitle.com to learn more about our Key to the Title system. We are live now at this point, and we have all the draft prep ready for you. We have tiered rankings, cheat sheets, you name it. Everything you need to prep for your draft is in there. We are in the middle of draft season, so you definitely want to check it out, keytothetitle.com.
If you're not on Apple Podcasts, you can find us on Spotify, YouTube, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, pretty much anywhere that you can fathom a podcast. That's where we are. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at FFBros Podcast, and be sure to check out our website, thefantasyfootballbros.com, for all kinds of articles, rankings, and so much more. See you next week, BroMob.
Bye, everybody.